because this is a kingdom issue, not just a government issue. And so we, the church, need to be involved in it. So, Yolanda, why don't you come on up and give us the full dose. The full dose. And, yeah, if you come that way, it'll be challenging. You could do it. Yes. Well, let's pray, and then we'll turn this over to Yolanda. Father, we thank you for the work that Yolanda and others are doing with Zoe Ministries and reaching people that have been trafficked, they're wounded, they're afraid, and they don't know how to get out, but you know how to get them out. And we just ask you, Father, that she would present things so that we could hear them, and we bless her in the work that she's doing, and we receive her as your gift to us tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. You're kind of all scattered out all over the place. I walk around a lot, so this will be fine. I know that there are a lot of other things you could be doing on a really beautiful evening than sitting here listening to me for the next 2 hours. However, I do believe that the people that are supposed to be here listening to this are here. That's what we always pray. And so I'm gonna go ahead and launch into this. This is a small enough group, and we're gonna be really informal. So when you have a question, just stick your hand in the air, and I will make sure I say, we're gonna cover that in the next slide, or I will answer your question right then, okay? So we're gonna take a break between like the trafficking 101 piece and the trauma piece. We're gonna take a little 5-minute stretch, breather, okay? So part of this I used for law enforcement, so there's gonna be a few slides that don't really fit that we're gonna kind of skip over. But we're gonna go ahead and get started. How many of you were here on that Sunday a couple weeks ago? So not every single person, but some of you. So some of this might be a repeat, but we're gonna go into a much deeper dive tonight than what we did. And I'm glad there's no children in here. So we'll just be cognizant if any of them sort of wander in. I may pause for a minute depending on what we have going on. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So defining human trafficking basically means modern day slavery. And it has been against the federal law since the TVPA, or the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Basically, it's when you sell somebody for commercial sex by using force, fraud, or coercion. Now, if you are 18 years of age or younger, you are automatically a victim of trafficking. You don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion if you're exchanging sex for anything, or any sexual act, or being filmed, or having pictures taken and sold of you. It doesn't have to be an actual sexual act. Okay, so they can use pictures and videos for child pornography, which happens all the time. And so it's not always just the sexual act. So 18 years of age or older, you have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. 17 years of age or younger, you're automatically a victim if you're exchanging sex or sex acts for anything. So we've got kids who are 17 years old who are giving their 14 or 15-year-old counterparts in school rides home and expecting a blowjob when they get there. That's trafficking. They're exchanging one thing for something else. So when we talk about a commercial sex act, it's not always money that they're receiving shelter or drugs or food or a place to stay. Survival sex is very, very common among homeless youth, which makes them really, really at risk, especially the LGBTQ community who get kicked out of their homes and they find themselves on the street, and these perpetrators quickly scoop them up and know exactly what to tell them and offer them everything that they're missing out on the street. And then within a few weeks, they're expecting an exchange for whatever. Some people confuse smuggling with trafficking. Smuggling is transportation-based. It's a violation against the border. Trafficking is a violation against a person. It's a human rights violation. So sometimes smuggling can become trafficking and they can intersect and overlap, but it doesn't have to be one to be the other. And the reason I have Flushing, New York highlighted, did I talk about this on that Sunday when I was here? There are new people here, so forgive this if this is new. But I'm going to show you a heat map in just a little bit. And on that heat map, you're going to see that the I-95 corridor is a hotbed. So one of the reasons 95 is a hotbed is because New York City is really close, and there's a place right outside of New York City called Flushing. And Flushing is where many individuals will come from to their trafficker. So let's say there's a woman in Asia who is in her late 20s, early 30s, and she's been promised a great job in America. Who doesn't want to come to America, right? The American dream. Great education, great jobs, make more money, send it home to your family, support your family. And so the family spends thousands of dollars to get their loved one here in hopes of a better future, right? But then what happens is when they arrive in Flushing, the trafficker is there to meet them, who takes the money, takes the individual, and also takes their passport, their visa, their IDs, and they often don't speak English. So then their only interpreter is their trafficker, who's holding all of their documents. So part of the coercive piece is that they're holding all these documents and they say, it cost me $10,000 to get you here, and your family only gave me $4. So now you owe me $6. And you're going to pay me back this way. And they might put them into domestic servitude. They might be in our watermelon fields here in Sussex County. They might be in a nail salon. They might be in a Chinese buffet. They might be in an Asian spa, which we're going to look at a little bit later. There are so many ways to traffic people. Down at our beaches, especially in the summertime, Dewey and Ocean City and Rehoboth and Lewis, all this huge influx of Eastern European college kids who come here to work in the summer, many of them are being trafficked. And some of them don't even know it until it's too late. So they'll they will often say, in order to pay back that debt, we'll pay you X amount, but then you have to pay me rent for where you're staying. You have to pay for your gas that I'm taking you to work. You have to pay for your food, and the costs are exorbitant amounts, 3 times more than whatever paycheck it is that they're making. So they're really not making anything. But here they are, they're stuck. And because this perpetrator is holding all of their documents, they threaten them with deportation or arrest. Or they say, we know where your family is in Mexico or in Asia. And if you don't do this, we're going to send somebody to kill them or hurt them. So there's always psychological manipulation, and there's a lot of different ways to coerce people. So it's really important to understand that you can traffic somebody without crossing any kind of border. You can traffic somebody in your own home. You don't have to leave. We have grandparents, parents, neighbors, friends, aunts and uncles selling for sex, their loved ones and their family members. It's happening more and more frequently because now we have kids who have been born into this 15, 20 years ago, and this is all they know. So this is what they've been groomed to. This is normal for them. It's normal. And so they just perpetuate. So one perpetrator can easily affect a couple hundred youth in a matter of a couple years. And it just keeps perpetuating. And with nobody to stand up and speak truth, with no power of God entering that situation, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And it is the power of God that is going to break this issue of trafficking that we have. And the promise that God gave me in 2012 is that he was going to change the landscape in Delaware when it came to trafficking, and he was going to use Zoe to do it. And the model that we are building is going to go out throughout the nation. I have no idea how he's going to do it, but I know that he is. Because every promise that he gives never returns void. And that is the 7th promise that he gave me, and I've watched 6 of them come through in the last 9 years. And I'm waiting for one more. So the exciting thing is that when it happens, y'all are going to be just as excited as I am, right? Because you're along with us for this journey, which I love. So we talked about force, fraud, or coercion, but there are 3 elements of trafficking. And this first part, this is what I do for law enforcement because they have no idea what trafficking is. When I say raise your hand if you can define trafficking for me by the Department of Justice or by a statute, by the federal statute or the state statute, not one of them ever raises their hand. So I have to go back and spell it out this way. So element number 1 is a process. So you're either recruiting somebody, you're harboring somebody, you're transporting them, you're obtaining them, or you're providing them for somebody else. Okay, so that's the first element that has to happen. Second element is a means, either force, fraud, or coercion. This is how they get their victims and keep them under control and get them to do what they want them to do. One of those means. The other element is an end. So why are they doing it? What is the purpose of the trafficking? And we're going to look at a slide pretty soon that gives 25 different types of trafficking that have been identified in the United States. Is this a video?
Today we are going to interview a few girls who've been in and out of prostitution and trafficking, so hopefully they can show us what prostitution looks like here.
I ran away from home the first time when I was 12 years old, and at 11 years old I knew what prostitution was. I shouldn't have known, but I knew what prostitution was through my sister and things that had happened to her.
When I was 4 years old, my dad decided to kill my mom, so he shot her through her back, and she was just bleeding to death, but no one there would call the police, so they put me in foster care. It was so hard, so I ran away from the system.
My mom didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore, and so she chose basically my stepdad over me, and she kicked me out, and she left me on the streets. She actually took me to a juvenile hall lobby and just left me there. And at 12 years old, I was supposed to figure out what I was supposed to do next. And what I did next was I got angry, and I started running.
Of course, you get out there, the pimps come. They come. They're like vultures. They're prowling up and down the street. They'll chase you. They'll get out their car, run down the street to get you. And there's this guy says, oh, I could take you away from foster care and away from your problems. You're worth gold, and and I can get you clothes, and you can have your nails done if you want, and your hair done, and you can have makeup, and we can go all around the world, and we can have money, and we can just do all these really cool things.
It was fun for me to be outside of home and to be living my own life. It was an adventure, like Huckleberry Finn or something I thought I was. It was like I'm out living my own life when all these other kids, oh, they're chumps, they're going to school and they're listening to authority.
And I'm listening to all this thinking, oh, this is my way out. Oh, finally, like this is my, knight in shining armor. He would tell me, oh, I love you, and we're doing this together. We're gonna stack up, and then we're gonna spend it. Oh yeah, I'm not getting this for you right now because I'm saving it. I'm saving it for us. It was a delusion. because everything he promised, he didn't give it to me. He gave me the exact opposite.
The first time that he had you sleep with someone else, what did you feel? Did you want to? Did you have a choice?
Oh no, he made it sound good. He was like, "Oh, I have this friend. He really thinks you're cute. I want you to have a date." He calls it a date. "I want you to date him. It will make me feel so good." And so I start liking the friend. Like, "Oh, really?" So you just do it. He said, "Go sleep with him." Tyrone, set it up. So I put this little outfit on he gave me, and then I went over there, and then he gave him the money, and then right when I got the money, he took the money.
In between then, there was a lot of rapes. So there was gang rapes, people lacing drugs and getting me to pass out so that they could gang rape me, other kids raping me, and then my self-esteem, my view of myself, what I was worth defending, became lower and lower and lower until I would just go with the person that was going to exploit me, and I knew it was going to happen. And that's how I ended up on the streets, and it was very, very easy for a pimp to convince me to go with him and make him some money, because at least he saw me as something valuable.
Did you see other girls that were 12 years old? Did you see younger girls also?
I knew about younger girls that were out there, but I thought I was the only 12-year-old. I was told to lie and say that I was 16 years old.
And this man, he took me, I was 14 years old, and he took me from here to California, okay, because he didn't want me to be here. And now I have a whole new identity. I'm not me anymore. I'm Tyra Brown now, and I'm 24 years old. I have the ID that matches it, you understand? The Social Security, yes. Everyone of they called Tricks knew I wasn't 24 years old, clearly, but they didn't care, you understand?
And you just kept on believing that his
Loved
love
it.
was real?
Loved it, loved him. I thought what was love. It was just that last piece of me holding on to anything that cared about me, that wanted me, that wouldn't let me go, that wouldn't, you understand? Because I felt like, hey, who loves me? Who cares about me?
There's so much that we could unpack in that small video, but I want to highlight just a few things. One of the things that she mentioned is that her trafficker would take her to California. So one of the things that they do is keep them on the move all the time. And that's easy to do on the 9-5 corridor, because you can be in 5 different states in 2 hours in any direction. So they keep them on the move constantly for a few reasons. First of all, they don't really want them to know where they are. They want to confuse them. So they might be in Salisbury, Maryland one day, Dover 2 days later, New York City for a week, and then Jersey City for a couple days, and then in Wilmington. So when Wilmington police ask, where have you been? Where have you been in the last week? They really don't know, because they have been kept constantly on the move. So they're not uncooperative witnesses, but they really don't remember, either because of the trauma or because they have been moved so very much. And oftentimes, because of the trauma, they are on drugs or some kind of substance that keeps them from feeling the pain. Because if you know that you have to endure that kind of complex trauma physically, emotionally, and spiritually, because this offends your soul to live this way. And so all of that trauma is compounded over and over and over and over again. So when we talk about complex compound trauma with one of these survivors, there are so many layers. And one thing, in the Christian community, and I've been in a lot of churches that are filled with really well-intended, big-hearted people that love Jesus and want to help, but sometimes the things that we say can be very damaging. When we talk about purity, when we talk about our families, when we talk about our dreams, when we talk about sin. And in that regard, when Adam and Eve were in the garden, it wasn't the sin It was the shame. That's what stuck with them. That's what made them cover themselves up, because the sin wasn't the issue. It was the shame that went on and on and on and on. And that's exactly what happens with these survivors. They carry so much shame for things that weren't even their choices. And so one thing that I have felt very impressed since I was here the last time, really God has pressed on me, is that I have been all over Delaware in the last 9 years in many different churches. This is the only place that I have been that I would say I would feel comfortable bringing our girls here and letting this be Zoe's home church. Because of the spirit here, because of the teachability, because of the humility, because of this on a Wednesday night. And I have been praying for a pastor and for a church for 9 years. And I have been visiting churches on purpose. And I knew that God would bring it before November, because that's when we want to open. That's our target date, is the middle of November. If God wants to change that and we move it, then we move it. But that's our target. So, as executive director, I am responsible to the girls. I'm not responsible for the girls, right? That's what we have to remember. We are responsible to be godly, to be teachable, to be trauma-informed when it comes to trafficking, but we are not responsible for the results, right? That's God's. So when we bring in a couple girls into this space and you treat them with dignity and you don't ask, what's your story? They don't need curiosity. They need value and self-worth instilled into them by the Spirit of God's people. So when I was here that Sunday and I said I felt very at home here, and then I was asked to come back, that was a confirmation to me that this church cares. So I appreciate every single one of you being here, and I don't know what God's going to do with this, but before I went any further, to me that's the most important thing I could say tonight. And we will learn as we go, and we'll learn together. And I'm still making mistakes in this all the time, and God still uses me. And I'm telling you, these girls are incredible human beings. They are absolutely no different than your daughters and your nieces and your sons and your nephews and your grandchildren. Given the same exact circumstances, any of our children could be found here. And they grow up into these amazing individuals. I could tell you so many success stories because they had somebody that would facilitate their healing and understand that God is the one that brings it, and we just create the space. We hold sacred space with them. And I need a place on Sunday mornings to hold sacred space with these kids. So let's look at some causes. Did I skip one? Here we go. Poverty, for obvious reasons, right? Because when you can't afford to pay your bills, but you can sell yourself and make $50 and pay your utility bill, that's why young moms with little kids who are homeless will often find themselves in a prostituted situation, not because they want to be a sex worker. Nobody wants to be a sex worker. Nobody. And I can launch off for an hour on why we should not decriminalize trafficking. We need to decriminalize the selling of sex, not the buying of sex. And I've got a phenomenal TED Talk that I'm going to tell you about as soon as I can remember her name. But it's about 15 minutes long, and everybody needs to watch it because there's this huge movement coming from California that we're going to legalize sex work. And when that happens, you think we've got trouble now? So we already talked about the attraction of a perceived higher standard of living somewhere else, lack of employment. We have organized crime all over Delaware. We have the mob. We have gangs. We have that here. Many social outcasts and so many issues with addiction. And that's often what the traffickers will use. So remember the girl in the video who said she was promised all this stuff, we're going to stack up, and then we'll run away and get married, and I'm going to fulfill all your dreams. So in order to do that, I'm going to set you up on a date. Well, she agreed because she loved him, and she wanted to keep him. And so she did whatever he wanted her to do because probably she was already trained in her childhood there was sexual abuse somewhere. So she was trained that whoever's going to take care of me is also going to abuse me. So that's a normalized dynamic. So she runs right into the arms of him who says, I love you, I'm going to take care of you. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have a date. So when she says no for the first time, that's when the force, fraud, or coercion piece comes in. She says no, and he says, oh, yes. And she may be beaten or gang raped or tortured, locked in a closet for 2 days with no food and water, and then forced to do the act as soon as the torture is over. So then she learns the next time he tells her this is what you're going to do, she does it really quickly. Like she acquiesces because she doesn't want the punishment. So she just does it because she knows she's going to have to anyway. That's where the shame comes in because he says, well, you're the one that made the choice. They know they are master manipulators. We all know that women and children are vulnerable just because they're women and children. The next few specifically are overseas, but homelessness is a huge one, huge in our country. And Delaware still has a lack of awareness. And those who are aware have a lack of care about it, or they are benefiting from it happening, overtly or covertly. Lord help us is right, because these are the leaders in our state that could do something and choose not to. And that is why it is the power of God's people rising up with truth that's going to break this and change the landscape. We know that child porn, hundreds of thousands of a website of free porn. And that is the jet fuel for trafficking. So when people think, I'm going to click on this free porn, and it's not hurting anybody, and even if nobody knows about it, even if you're a single guy and you're not worried about a wife or children, most people don't realize that the women and children behind that camera are being trafficked to do that work. When these girls are brought in, or these women are brought into the stable, the group of girls that are controlled by this perpetrator, they don't let them sleep, they don't let them eat, and they live stream hardcore porn in that house day and night so that they understand what they're going to be expected to do, either behind a camera or live. And it's violent stuff, horrible, evil stuff that happens, like satanic stuff that happens. The porn is getting more and more and more violent all the time because, as we know, that's what the devil does, right? He grabs you, and then he entangles you, and then he drowns you in it. And it becomes bigger than your ability to get out of. So as you can see, the United States is the largest consumer in the world of sex trafficking. And that little blue blurb up there is the 95 corridor. And this is the map that I saw put out by Polaris when I started this work in 2012. And you can't even see Delaware underneath all of the red. And when I showed this to the Attorney General's office and law enforcement and victim services folks that I knew and all the people that should know about this issue, and I showed them this, and they scoffed at it. We don't have this issue here. This doesn't happen in the first state. This is where people come on vacation with their children to the beach. Shut up and sit down. And sometimes they were not that nice about it. But I knew what God told me. So I just kept my smile on my face. I kept being Jesus, and I just kept speaking truth. Because he told me, I will stir people on the periphery. I will get them in the positions that I want them in, and I will prepare them, and you're not going to have a clue what I'm doing over here. You just stay on your path and worry about you, little missy. You just keep being Jesus and do not stop speaking truth, no matter who's in front of you. And I did that, and I watched him start bringing people into my path, so when I spoke truth, they jumped right on board to what he was doing. We are putting his hand to what he is doing. He is not putting his hand to what I'm doing. He can get rid of me at any time. And this is going to keep on rolling. So these are the 25 different types of trafficking that occur. Polaris is sort of the watchdog for trafficking activity in the United States, and they are the ones that identified these different types of sex and labor trafficking. So tonight we're going to look at massage parlors, escort services, and online exploitation. Our niche in Zoe is domestic, minor, sex trafficking. Okay, so our house, our mentoring program, everything that we do is kids. Nobody wants to do kids in the United States because it's hard and it's costly and there's licensing and there's policies and there's all the stuff that we have been going through for the last year with this house that we have. And we're hung up now on the fire marshal thing. And it's costing us $50,000 more than what we have in our budget for sprinkler systems and for all the stuff that we now have to put in this house because we're doing kids. Nobody wants to do kids. It's hard stuff. So when the United Nations puts out a report saying 300,000 kids a year in the United States are being trafficked, and we have less than 500 beds for kids in the nation, this just continues. And these kids, when they don't have healing, and this is not addressed, and they have this brokenness and this trauma, that's what they give away. You give away what you got, right? You're coloring with a gray crayon, you're going to color gray. You can't expect purple, right? So when we don't address it, then we're growing up all of these perpetrators that are growing up on porn and growing up on drugs. And then we wonder why we have such a broken community. Because we're raising broken children and we're not speaking truth to it. So, let's keep moving. Okay, this is where it gets pretty graphic. So I want to make sure that there are no kids in here at this point, and that no come in. So, I told you we're going to look at online exploitation. So this is called Rub Maps. And this can be accessed through a Google search. So my 13-year-old son can pull this up at any time. You just click in Rub Maps Delaware and this pops up. And then all he has to do is hit the button, yep, I'm over 18, and opens up a whole new world. Yes, ma'am. You need me to go back? These are not our kids. Yeah. Everybody Yeah, if it's an obvious child, then don't, but most of these are adult women that are already on the internet. But thank you for asking me that. I appreciate that. So I just want to show you what's online because I could tell you about it, but the visual is much more impactful. But I also don't want you going to these websites to see what's here. I am showing this to you so that you know it's here because we don't want you, for multiple reasons, going on this website, including Homeland Security and FBI looking at your URLs, wondering why you're looking at this. They know I'm looking at this because I follow this stuff every day. I track people to see where they are. So this is really small, and I apologize. So in the city of Dover, there are 19 of these massage parlors. Here's a list, but all the cities in Delaware have them. So within the city limits, there are 19 of these spas. Now, as you can see, they can be in a strip mall. They might be a little house sitting by themselves that has a little open flashing sign. It might say aromatic massage. It might say Chinese foot parlor. It might say aromatherapy. It can have multiple names, but it's often open late at night, and nobody's really there going in and out like normal business hours during the day. Front door might be locked, might have blacked out windows or doors. It just looks sketchy, like something in you is like, something's not right in there. More than likely, those spas are venues for trafficking. And it's often middle-aged women who are from Asia, who are promised all those promises. They get here, they get stuck in the back of one of these, and they are sold for sex every day, not allowed to leave. They live there, work there, completely dependent on their trafficker for survival. And if they don't do it, they are forced, frauded, or coerced. Are we switching? Yep. Okay. They are forced, frauded, or coerced into the behavior that the perpetrator wants. So we're going to look at some of those. But up here, you can see it gives the telephone number, the address, how much per hour. And over here, it says review. So you click on this. If you're looking to buy somebody, you click on that and see what the guys who have been there previously, what their experience was, like a movie review. So here's another full page. Some of them look like houses. Some of them are storefronts. Most of them are small, square houses, and I've passed probably 2 or 3 of them from Greenwood to here without even having to look very far. So many of these spas are not even on Rub Maps. They don't have to have Rub Maps because once you start knowing what to look for, you know exactly what they look like. And you're going to drive by 113 Route 1, and you're going to start seeing these everywhere once you know what to look for. So when you click on the review, this is what comes up. Up here, it says, oh, okay, up, go over. Yep, okay, right there. So time of visit is afternoon. Storefront, paid to house is $60. Now scroll all the way to the bottom. All the way to the bottom over here. Over here. Oh, there we go. Extra tip is $40. Okay, so black that out for just a second because I want to talk about that. Oh, I can black it out. Ah, I'm all techie now. So the $60 would be, like, let's say Colleen and I decide we had a hard day and we want to go get a massage. These may or may not be certified massage therapists. But we go in, we get our hour massage, we pay our $60, we walk out. No harm, no foul. Okay, but if a man walks in there, he knows why he's walking in there because it's that kind of a spa. He is not looking for a pedicure, right? So he goes in, has his hour-long massage, but the last 10 minutes, she offers him a happy ending. And that might be a number of different services for a number of different amounts. But what he doesn't realize is that while she is an adult offering sex to him, she is a trafficked victim who is stuck there and has to meet a quota every day. The average quota is between $500 and $1,000 a day. This woman is not leaving. She doesn't have a phone. She doesn't have a car. She has no way to make money other than sell herself to the men who are coming in there to buy her. So if you don't know better, you think, well, here's an adult woman offering a man sex. She's a prostitute. It makes sense, right? Because that's how law enforcement is trained. That's what I thought 10 years ago. I get it. Okay. So these women, this one's name is Annie. They're rated. She has 4 out of 5 stars. They're rated on ethnicity, age, height, eye color, hair length, breast size, whether or not they have implants, and their sexual organs. They're also rated on their sexual services, which I'm not going to read. I want to read down here, though, at the very bottom. It says, Annie is cute in her own way and not ugly, but those looking for a thin, sultry Asian need to look elsewhere. Her showers are very nice, as she gives gentle attention to the boys. She doesn't work the backside as well as others I've visited. On the massage, she's pretty good. Not a hard massage, but comfortable. She has some skills on the flip as well and is very gentle and follows instruction well. You know how most Korean girls can be a bit chunky but still small in size. They can still be sexy in a way while carrying some weight. She just has a bit more meat than I would want, but is sweet and not bad at her job. See her and decide for yourself. So this is what happens when law enforcement is untrained in a situation like this. Okay, so this was July of 2015 in Delaware. A worker at a Claymont spa is accused of offering sex to an undercover state trooper for money. The incident happened at the Moon Spa at that address, which I looked up that day and it popped right up on Rub Maps. A man called police Thursday saying he was offered sex. Undercover trooper then went into the spa for a massage. While performing the massage, Ms. Zhang, 47, where's she from? Flushing, red flag, offered to perform a sex act on the trooper for cash. And what happened to her? Can you read that? She was issued a summons for prostitution and released. So you know what happened to her? She got beat because it cost him money, and it was all the hours out of the spa that cost him money. So she now has a record and more complex compound trauma at the end of that day. But if we don't know better, we say, oh, good for law enforcement. Got another one of those hookers off the street. Aren't we so much safer now? But do you notice, if this is really prostitution and not trafficking, which it's not, they're the same thing, because no prostitute has freedom of movement and freedom of choices every day of her life. They are the same thing. A pimp is the same as a trafficker. And there are reasons why women choose to do the work that they do in sex work, because something has happened to them and they are wearing their shame. And they may think that's the only thing they're good for. But they're not making a choice because that's always what they've dreamed of doing since they were a little girl. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be assaulted, beaten, robbed, which is their daily life. Every single day, these women are dealing with this. And they learn to survive. They're very smart people. So this is a room in the back of one of these trafficking spas. This is very typical of where they live and where they work. So because I'm a trauma therapist, I look at everything through the lens of trauma. And if you consider their quota, and if they could get $100 a service, which they don't, they get between $15 and $25 a service. But conservatively, if it was $100 a service and $500 quota, and they have to do it every single day, every month, no matter what time of the month it is, because you don't get off for that. You don't stop making money ever, which causes other enormous health problems. You are looking at 1,820 rapes and sexual assaults minimum in 1 year. And you can probably quadruple that, maybe quintuple that. So you think of somebody you know who has been assaulted or raped one time, and how that changes the way they think about themselves, the way they think about the world, the way they think about God. Now imagine this. And it is no wonder they have no concept of who God really is. So for them to really understand who God is, we have to show them. We are his skin. Oh, wait, I want to go back and show you this. So this right here, this sweet little dove that's on this trafficker's card that we always think of as like peace or love is actually a sign for outcall. So the difference between in-call and outcall is that if you call Carlo at this number, who is the trafficker, and you can set up the time, the date, the service, the amount of money, outcall means he will come out to you. You can say, I want you to come to my house. I want you to come to a bar. I want you to come to a strip club. I want you to come to a truck stop. That's outcall. In-call means we are positioned here at this hotel on 13, and you have to come here if you want the service. So that's the difference between in-call and out-call. And you're going to see that on the next slide, because we're going to leave Rub Maps now, which is the spas, and we're going to go over to a website that's called BedPage. Now, it used to be called Backpage. Anybody heard of Backpage? It was in the news a year or two ago, and the feds came in and shut them down. They had been on Craigslist. That got shut down. They moved to Backpage. That got shut down. Then they moved to BedPage. And this is already being shut down, and they're already moving on somewhere else. Because every time they get shut down, they just move. It's a $32 billion a year industry with a B in the United States. It's not going away just because we shut down a website. So I want to show you what this looks like. And I'm sorry it's so small. But I just took this off on May the 6th, and all I did was put in BedPage, Delaware. And it's just nasty on here. Like, I'm not even going to read what some of this says, but you can see in-call and out-call. There's also, see where it says new Asian Korean girls, new young Asian girls. Words like petite or extra small or new in town, it means they're minors. And there are boys also that are victims, and there are females who are perpetrators. And often what will happen is in this stable or this group of girls, one of them will sort of rise to the top. Either she's been there the longest, or she's the most loyal, or she brings in the most money, or she's the most responsible. And she's called the bottom, or the bottom bitch. And she is the one that is responsible for keeping all the girls in the stable straight, or she answers to the perpetrator. So if one of them steps out of line, or doesn't obey a rule, or doesn't bring in a quota, then she has to come up with a punishment. And sometimes that punishment is she's going to make girl A beat the tar out of girl B until she can't stand up anymore. So you've got the shame, again, of being forced to punish girls that you are relating to. Yes. So there's just so many complex dynamics with this that it takes years to unravel. So there are just pages and pages and pages. And see where it says young and sweet new Asian girls? Like, they're not worried about getting caught in Delaware. They're saying, yes, we have minor kids and we will sell them to you for sex. And we are not worried about law enforcement. And we'll put this all over wherever we want because we've had one prosecution of trafficking, one, since 2014 when I helped pass state legislation. And they didn't even want to do it then. And the only reason we have that, you are just the cutest thing. You are, cannot even stand it. I'm going to have to come over there and kiss you in a minute. I have to look over here because I'm getting too distracted by the cuteness. What was I saying? Yes, one. Okay, one, right. So the state was doing nothing. 2014, 2015, 2016, and finally, the end of 2016, the feds came in and said, look, Delaware, you are not doing anything with this statute. Let us show you how to do it. And so we made an arrest and prosecution, and there hasn't been one since then. There have been arrests since then because law enforcement that I have trained is starting to set up stings, and they're starting to see it and recognize it. So they're putting these beautiful cases together that takes months and sometimes a year and a half or two to build a case because these are tough cases to prosecute because they keep them moving all the time, and there's all these rings, and it's hard to get to the underneath part of these and break them apart. And they finally do it because it takes so long. And then our AG and her office will not prosecute. And I asked, there was a sting that I helped with, multiple stings that I helped with, but there was one particular one in Smyrna about a year and a half ago. They set up this beautiful case. We had a whole victim services piece. They called me and they said, can we hand off to you these women? They're Mandarin speaking only. I said, yep, I got it. So I pulled this team of people together. We had Mandarin speaking interpreters from an aftercare facility come down from New York. And they came down ahead of time. And we had we had the right colors, we had the right food, we had the right tea, we did our homework. We took these women into a secure location that the cops shut down for us so that we could have it for 24 hours. We had cots, we had everything. And we made sure that these women knew what their rights were and understood that they were victims and not in trouble. And it was beautiful. And there are several of them that were going to testify. It is impossible to get these women to testify because they're scared to death. Because they've been told, if you ever testify, we will kill your entire family. And they may have already killed one or two of them. And if we have nothing to offer them that's more attractive than what the traffickers are offering them, they're not going to testify, and they're not going to leave their trafficker. If they're being offered food and shelter and water and drugs and all the things that they think they need, and then we say, we don't have any of that for you, but we're just going to ask you to risk your life on the witness stand to help us out. So then law enforcement becomes one more person that's using them for what they need without any care or concern for their own needs. And then they say, yep, the trafficker was right. Cops don't care about me either because they're offering me nothing. Which is why we have to, as the church, step up and be the answer. What happened with the case? If I could have ever lost my salvation over a case, it would have been that one. It was null prost, and they threw it out. Department of Justice would not prosecute. They wouldn't even try. And I had the 5 prosecutors and Kathy Jennings, who is our AG, on a Zoom call with 3 of my team members to get an answer as to why. And it was the sorriest excuse of an answer I have ever heard. It was pathetic. And it was really everything I could do to be Jesus in that moment, because we had women now with no help, no resources, no nothing. And Zoe ended up spending our money to transport them and get them the care that they needed because the state wouldn't do it. Yes. Once this lid opens, the snakes and worms coming out of that, you can't get them back in. Yep. But one of these times it's going to happen. It has to. Absolutely right. Because all those people, something happened to them to make them behave that way to other people. Because they're giving away what they've got. And that's what I struggled with when I first started in this work. I started researching and hearing these stories, and I found myself getting really angry. And I told the Lord, you're going to have to deal with that because I cannot go into your work with your mission with this attitude. I can't. Like, you're going to have to deal with that. And I will not go forward until I can handle talking to some of these survivors without the anger. And so I was in praise and worship Sunday morning, minding my own business, just worshiping the Lord, not even thinking about this. And I felt like this wrecking ball come into my gut, and I heard God say, I'm not going to release you from ministry until not only are you not angry, but you have my heart, my eyes, and my love for the perpetrators. And he did it. He did it. And I have this very vivid memory within just a few weeks of me constantly laying myself before him saying, give it to me. Like, I cannot make myself have that. I need you to give it to me. And my youngest was about 3 at the time, and I was in school, and I was working on my laptop, and I heard God say, look at him. And my 3-year-old was sitting on the floor by my feet playing with Legos. So I'm looking at him. I'm like, okay, God, I'm looking at him. I see him. And he says, they all started just like that. All of them. The worst ones. And then something happened to them. It is not flesh and blood. Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's what we have to understand, is that in this ministry, we pray for the perpetrators. And we love the perpetrators the way God loves perpetrators. I don't always do it well, but that's my goal. All right, I digress. So, because they're not afraid to show young girls, these are the kind of photos that are associated with these ads. So those are individual ads that you can click on to buy sex, like you're buying a refrigerator on Craigslist. You can buy them on BedPage. So these are some of the apps that parents really need to watch with their kids. They're constantly changing because one of the ways that perpetrators connect with kids now is through social media, through apps, through gaming, through videos. And so, for example, there's a calculator app that when a parent that's well-intended is looking through a kid's phone to make sure that there's no sketchy apps or information on there, they scroll right past the calculator app, completely unaware that there's a 4-digit code that the perpetrator and the child alone know. And when you punch in that 4-digit code, a whole world opens up of sexting and videos and live chat rooms and texts that are not in a regular text thread or in a regular camera roll. So again, looking at trauma and equating it to the gain of the perpetrator, if they have to make $1,000 quota a night for 1 year and there's 4 girls in a stable, they're making $1.5 million tax-free off of 4 girls. Which is why this is not going away, because there's huge benefit in this. So if we look at who the traffickers are, they can be absolutely anybody, just like victims can be absolutely anybody. It's anybody who wants to exploit somebody else for their own selfish gain. So they can be males or females, adults or minors, family members. It can be absolutely anybody. You heard about the Epstein case and the island and all the, rich men going over and buying these kids for sex. And then you have that all the way down to gangs and street hookers. And everything in between. It can be absolutely anybody. There is no profile and no MO for being a victim or being a trafficker. So when we look at how do we bring awareness, who are our target to bring prevention to, these are our targets in Zoe Ministries. This is who we run to. These are the kids that we want in our mentoring programs. These are the kids that are at risk, exponentially high risk for being trafficked because they have these things in their history. Foster care kids especially. All foster care kids, if you know of a foster care kid, they've already been traumatized just by the fact that they're in foster care. Something happened to cause them to be in foster care, and then foster care often is traumatizing. It can be traumatizing even in a good family. It's still traumatizing. And all those kids need extra support. So if you know of people in your communities, in your neighborhoods, in your church that are foster kids, please send them to us into our mentorship program. We have spring, summer, fall, 8-week sessions. And it is a phenomenal curriculum. And it's free. So we have a farm in Harbison, and we're working on a farm in Middletown. But Harbison is where, in fact, we're starting next week or the week after is our summer sessions that start for 8 weeks. Commute. Yep. So we talked about this a little bit before. Sexual abuse has consistently been identified as a robust risk factor for involvement in commercial sex because of that training of the brain that they have from before. These are words from a survivor. Being in foster care was the perfect training for commercial sexual exploitation. I was used to being moved without warning, without any say, not knowing where I was going or whether I was allowed to pack my clothes. After years in foster care, I didn't think anyone would want to take care of me unless they were paid. So when my pimp expected me to make money to support the family, it made sense to me. So we already talked about the quota. The family is like that pseudo-family structure that the trafficker sets up with him at the head. He's the daddy, the uncle, the boyfriend, the husband, and then the stable with the bottom in the middle. So this is what happened in 2014 in Maryland, because Maryland's been trained, and they have a task force, and they know what they're doing, and they have AGs that will actually prosecute these cases. So Maryland State Police said they rescued 2 women being held against their will for prostitution. The women were 20 and 25 years old. One of them sent a text message Sunday to her family for help, who called the police. They arrested a 33-year-old and a 23-year-old man on 2 counts of trafficking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and heroin. Now, I want you to pay attention, particularly to this last paragraph, because when people ask me, what's the difference, like legally, what's the difference between prostitution and trafficking? Because in reality, there is no difference. But according to the Department of Justice, it's force, fraud, and coercion, right? So we're going to watch how it might start out as sex work, but it never stays that way, ever. The women told police that they initially agreed to have Anthony arrange clients for them. Sex work, right? Prostitution. I want you to arrange clients for me. But that he beat one of them on Sunday. Force, fraud, or coercion. And threatened to kill her. And police say they feared for their lives. Okay, so think about this. We've got adult women in a hotel room with drugs, having sex, selling themselves to men. Untrained law enforcement is going to say prostitution. Trained law enforcement is going to take a deeper dive, ask the right questions, and realize that these are victims. So here are some brandings that are specific to trafficking. These brandings can be anywhere in the body, and it's generally the name of the gang or name of the pimp. And they are branded for multiple reasons. The first most obvious is the psychological manipulation. I own you, you're my property, you can never get away from this. The other reason they do it is because if they do run away and another gang or pimp finds them, they know who to return them to. So this one says King Tay. That says lay low. This one says one and only lay low. So these two women are in the same stable, branded by the same trafficker. So there's a few more. And if nothing else is burned in your mind from tonight, I want you to look at this. This little girl right here, who's 14 or 15, these two girls, normal, typical 14, 15-year-olds in our schools and communities. They start getting groomed and lured here, and they get caught in this cycle that they can't get out of drugs and exploitation. This is 5 years later. This is what we have 5 years after that. This is what we have 5 years after that. So when our communities and our churches particularly see this one, any of these, walking on a street barely dressed or coming into church stinking, got to check ourselves. And our response should be, thank God she is in church. How can I love her? But that's often not what a lot of Christians think. Is this a video or is this a blank slide? I think we'll do this video and then we will take a break. If I can just see which video it is. No, that's the cop one. We want to switch. Keep going. Or do I keep going? Okay, sorry. Getting a little trigger happy up here. Do I have another video right after that one? Okay, let me see what I have right after that. Because I think it's going to be about time for a break. Okay, now go up. Where are we? Keep going. Okay, go to my portrait that I just showed. Nope, go down. Go down again. Go down again. Hit that one right there. Okay, so we're gonna, this begins the complex trauma piece. So we're gonna take like a real quick 5-minute break, and then we're gonna come back. 2-minute break. Okay, 1 minute and 45-second break. So get going. And there's no bridge to the prefrontal cortex. It stops at the downstairs brain, which means that they're living in this downstairs brain all the time. So we expect morality or executive function from up here when there is no bridge there. And they live constantly in their downstairs brain. "25 years old. And younger. Yes. And I will say that female brains develop faster. Yeah, 22 to 23 for females, 25 for males. Correct. Mm-hmm. So what happens with trauma in the brain is when a child is ignored, abused, or afraid, the downstairs brain reorganizes into fight, flight, or freeze. And that's where that limbic system comes in, right? So what happens is when they live there, that downstairs brain overdevelops because they're living there constantly. The upstairs brain doesn't develop. It underdevelops because they're here constantly. So children, even who are just neglected, that's where they live. Even if they've never been beaten, if they're neglected, that's where they're living, in their limbic system. Common? No. Mm-mm. Oh, yeah. Yes, I have seen that, but I didn't know what his name was, but I've seen it. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen those scans, but I didn't know what his name was. Yeah. Right. Right. That's right. Yeah. But you can see trauma. Like you can see the effects of it. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So not only do we have upstairs, downstairs, but we have left brain, right brain. So we have 4 sections, right? So the right brain is like math and science and logic. And the other part of the brain is like colors and emotion and dance and art and all of those like artsy crafty things, right? So what happens with left and right brain is that trauma results in the left hemisphere being strong and the right hemisphere being weak. Which means that then children will struggle with their emotions, with different sensations, like body sensations that they take in through their 5 senses, and social situations. So they could be sitting in here and smell somebody's cologne that smelled like a perpetrator's and instantly be triggered. Not because they're choosing, but their brain reacts because it's through the senses. The 5 senses are key for trauma because that's usually what's perpetrated are those senses, but that's also what heals is the senses, which is another super cool thing about God. So we're going to look at a little piece of the brain called the corpus callosum. It is the bridge between the right brain and the left brain. It's how information goes back and forth between the 2 hemispheres. And it integrates our motory, our sensory, and our performance. Okay? So what happens in trauma is that corpus callosum shrinks. It gets really small, which means that that bridge, it takes for a long time for the information to cross over from one side of the brain to the other. So what that might look like is if I bring a girl in here and she is throwing a ball against the wall, And we say to her, Tasha, let's bounce the ball outside. And she just keeps throwing it against the wall. And you want to say, Tasha, did you not hear me? I said, let's take the ball outside. But it's going to take her 5 times as long to process that because the information hasn't crossed over. So she just keeps doing it, and we think she's being belligerent and disobedient, but she really is just still trying to process. So if we're patient with that and give her a choice to do it the right way and create a new neural network, and then we reward her for that, she's going to be more likely to ski down that mountain the next time. Instead of us just saying, stop doing that. Okay, so I just talked about this. So we have to think about it as a trauma brain rather than a willfully defiant brain. We have to label it different. So now we're going to talk about the thalamus. The thalamus sits on top of the spine, and it goes up to the prefrontal cortex and also down to the amygdala. Okay? So remember the thalamus, it goes up and it goes down, and it's the gateway for all of the senses except for smell. Okay, so all of our 4 senses have to go to 2 places in order for us to feel it. The thalamus first, and then either up to the cerebral cortex or down to the amygdala. So the amygdala is our smoke alarm. That's what detects fear or danger. So the pathway from the thalamus to the amygdala is short and straight and super fast. So what happens, and I know this is getting technical, but hang with me here because this is really fascinating. So in the amygdala, it consults with the hippocampus. The hippocampus is like a photo album of everything you've experienced and done in your life. It's in your hippocampus. So tonight, for example, I could say, last week I went to Abundant Life Church and I talked at 7 and I didn't end till 11:30. And we all had a great time and we all laughed and told jokes and it was wonderful and we left. But if somebody comes in here and starts shooting with a gun, my hippocampus is recording that and saying, the last time I was in this church and I stood here, I saw a shooter come through that door. And so I'm gonna take in this church and it's gonna go into my amygdala, but it's gonna check with my hippocampus, and my hippocampus is gonna say, oh, not safe, not safe, not safe. Last time this happened, do you remember what happened? And I'm not trying to think it, it's just automatic in my brain. Which is why when they smell a cologne and have a reaction, it's because their hippocampus is saying the last time you smelled that cologne, you were being gang raped. The last time you smelled that alcohol, you were being beaten. Because the hippocampus takes pictures of everything. So the threat signal is sent down the brainstem, and then the autonomic nervous system engages without them even thinking about it. It immediately goes into fight, flight, or freeze. So if you know of any veterans that have to sit facing the door, or they hear a firework go off and they are on the floor under a desk before they even know what happened, it is their brain engaging automatically because of this. And this is what happens with trafficking survivors. Now, if you had one incident of a shooter coming in a door, you're going to remember that. That's going to be like a huge highlight in your memory. But if you have complex compound trauma and you're being raped and beaten multiple times a day, day after day, week after week, month after month, do you know how exhausted the hippocampus is looking through all that constantly? There's no rest. Their brains never get any rest. They're constantly in their lower brain, fight, flight, freeze, all the time. And then we wonder why they can't have just conversation. It's impossible for them to be engaged. So the hippocampus stores explicit memory, which is what's easily recalled, what's intentionally recalled. And it encodes emotional information, and it takes a panoramic picture. And it puts 2 stamps on every memory. How long you were there and when you were there. Okay? So next week I could say, I went on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, yada, yada, yada. Okay? That's my panoramic picture putting those 2 stamps on it. That's what the hippocampus does. But what happens with trauma in the hippocampus is that it cannot fully function because the hippocampus is flooded. It is drowning in cortisol, which is what happens in your stress reaction. It's literally drowning in it. And so it lowers the ability to encode properly. So therefore, it does not put a timestamp on that picture, and it takes a fragmented picture instead of a panoramic. So they might be able to remember one thing, but they can't remember anything else. That's why sometimes a rape victim will say, I just remember a red shirt, or I remember a tattoo, or I remember a mustache. But I have no idea what his face looks like, or what color skin he had, because it's taking fragmented picture because of the trauma. So then it overgeneralizes, and it creates false information, because your brain is trying to make sense of it, but it just can't quite remember, so then it makes up what seems to be the most logical thing, which is why they'll tell you they were in New York when they were really in Colorado, because there was a hotel that they were in once in Colorado that kind of looked like something they saw in New York once. And so they're just trying to make sense of it, but they're not trying to lie, which is why some people will say, oh, they're just master manipulators. They just like to manipulate. They're not manipulating. It's really how their brain works. So the amygdala becomes hyperactive. It overreacts to stressors, and it takes a very long time to bring it back down again. Once that gets activated, it just stays hyper constantly. So what does it look like? They are easily triggered. They are hypervigilant. So if they are in here praise and worship and they are constantly looking around, they're constantly checking out people, they're really not worshiping, they're nervous, they're checking for the doors, they're looking at their time, they're looking around constantly for danger because that is how they have survived. You have to pause sometimes after a question or a request because of that small bridge, the crossover, the corpus callosum. And as I said, they will struggle with emotions and sensory and creativity because of that side of their brain has been underdeveloped, and they want to have some kind of control. Not because they're trying to control you, but because they've had no control. And so if there's simple choices that we can give them, would you like to sit on this end or would you like to sit on that end? Let them make the choice. Let them slide down their mountain. Because it shows that you trust them. They have the ability to make good choices. We have to instill that in them. And if we're constantly making choices for them, they don't have the opportunity to understand that they can make their own choices and they can be good at it. I have no idea why I did that, all fancy. So when we say, like, how do we respond? And this is what I teach law enforcement, because they're coming in a hot mess, right? And they're like, we don't know what to do with these victims. Like, we have no clue. If you're not around, what do we do? So oftentimes what will happen is because of that trigger, because of that, you know, if there's a loud car door and you see somebody like jarred, just very gently say, that was just a car door, it's okay. Like, recognize that in their hippocampus, it's saying, the last time I heard a noise like that, I was being shot at. So just lovingly, gently reminding them that was a car door. Deep breathing exercises are probably the number one instant calming almost 99% of the time. And it's something anybody can do and anybody can learn. And it's a 4-7-8 pattern. You breathe in for 4, you hold it for 7, and then you breathe out for 8, as slow as you can through pursed lips. And you do it 5 or 6 times, and you do it with them so they can mirror you. And that will help calm down the amygdala. Checking in with their body sometimes, like sometimes they'll hold a lot of tension in their neck or between their shoulder blades, or they'll clench their fists. And being, like, noticing and being really attuned to what it is they're experiencing, you can see where they hold their trauma. Offering choices, again, and grounding skills are great with the senses, again, because they're injured through the senses. They can also have healing brought through the senses. So I have one woman that I work with who loves horses, and we get her a fresh Ziploc bag of hay every week. And when she gets triggered, she opens it up, she takes it out, and she smells it. She does this with her fingers, so she has the tactile plus the smell. And the smell goes direct, remember? So it's really fast. So when they can be triggered really fast, they also can be calmed really fast if they have something else to smell that reminds them of a good memory. If they like to listen to a certain kind of music, if they can bake cookies, whatever it is that they can use their senses with, that often will help ground them. But the breathing is something, no matter where you are, you can do. And it's really very, very helpful. We're almost done. So I went through all of this before. This talks a little bit about our programming. Back there somewhere on that corner, I have some, right up there, I have some pamphlets that talk about our programming. If you want to pass those out, that's fine. And then I have another folder somewhere floating around back there that Pastor Betts asked me to bring, like, volunteer opportunities for Zoe. Yep, right there. So if everybody could get one of those, whoever wants can get one of those and a brochure. I want to tell you a little bit about our programs and ways that you can plug in. So we have a prevention education that we use in middle school and high schools, and it's called POP, Power Over Predators. And we go into, our goal is, once this COVID mess is over, as it's going to get, through 6th and 9th grade classes. And we talk about everything from sextortion to cyberbullying to Aaron's Law to SIPA to trafficking. How are you potentially lured? What makes you a victim? What makes you a target? Who are the predators? And we try to use prevention rather than aftercare. I'd always rather do prevention than aftercare, but unfortunately we have to do both. We also do community awareness events like this in churches, Rotary clubs, civic organizations. So if you have those kind of connections that we can make, we'll be happy to come do a presentation. I talked a little bit about our mentorship program and our equine farm in Harbison. We need mentors and we need kids. So if you have community kids that need extra support, maybe they're dealing with anxiety, depression, parents' divorce, whatever it is, or they're in the foster care system, bring them to us. Age 12 to 17, boys and girls. And we make sure that the gender is the same between mentor and mentee. I do professional trainings for medical, law enforcement, physicians, mental health professionals. We also offer clinical counseling. We can do art therapy, play therapy, regular talk therapy, but we also do the EGALA model, which is equine assisted growth and learning. So it's clinical psychotherapy with a herd of horses. And it's really, really powerful. And we collaborate with Courageous Hearts. We use their farm for that. I talked a little bit about our residential treatment home for female minors ages 12 to 17 to open. We're praying by November. And then we also collaborate with the Salvation Army because they are building the adult infrastructure in Delaware. The case manager's name is Lauren Arnold, and she heads up that program. And they have emergency services and some case management, but no long-term housing yet. So my last slide is this 1-800 number, and this is the number that I ask everybody to call if you suspect trafficking. You know the red signs, the red flags and the indicators and the signs. It's easy to memorize. It's 888 with 3737 in the middle. And you can call anonymously 24/7, 365, And there's, I think, 175 different languages. So any time that you suspect trafficking, you call this number. It's about a 10-minute phone call, and they put another little red dot, like we saw on that heat map. That's how that heat map had all those red dots, is from people calling. The other person I would ask you to call too, I mean, you can always call me, but I do have some detectives that are trained that I work with, and we also are currently working with some attorneys who are going to work on attacking this issue civilly rather than criminally, because the criminal element is not working in Delaware right now. So we're going to try to go after this on the civil side, which I think is going to be hugely successful. So I think that's all I have. Are there any? Well, oh, can I borrow this real quick? I just want to go over this really fast. So this coming Saturday, we are going to have a work day out at our property. We need a lot of help out there. There's a lot of work to do. It's mostly yard work, but we have landscaping we have to pull out. We have a deck that needs staining. We have a side of a house that needs staining. We have a barn that has to be cleaned out. We need a stall that needs to be ripped up. There's just a lot of work. And we need men, and we need trucks, and we need equipment. So normally we would have you go through our volunteer orientation first and have your background checks and all that. But because we don't have the girls there, we would just ask that you sign a non-disclosure form before you come, and understand that you cannot talk about the location or the property to anybody for any reason at any time, because we have to keep this location safe and private and confidential. So you'll sign a non-disclosure form. You'll turn off your location services and your phone before you come onto the property, before you turn off the road. So yes, everything has to be turned off before you get on the property, and then once you get on, you have to sign a non-disclosure form that you won't talk about the location of the property to anybody else. Well, we did have a volunteer coordinator that was overseeing that. She is no longer with us. So one of the other positions we have open is volunteer coordinator. So we are looking to hire somebody. It probably would be like 10 to 15 hours a week. But we need somebody to oversee this, not only oversee this, but help us build a really robust volunteer program, because we're really going to need that as we move forward. So we do have that need as well. And we also will be hiring the end of the summer for our residential staff. So residential staff has certain requirements, and we will have that listed on our website. But we're going to have 8-hour shifts. So 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. Night shift does not sleep. We do room checks every 15 minutes, because if there's going to be havoc, it's going to be at night. And all around the clock, there's going to be 2 people on. Licensing requires us only to have 1. They require the stupidest stuff. And then the stuff that really means something, that can have an impact on the girls, it makes no sense to me. They're saying 1 person around the clock with less than 10 girls, and they can sleep at night. So we're going way above and beyond that and saying there is no sleeping. And so there's going to be training. We're going to do a lot of trauma training and a lot of equipping. So we're looking at doing our training the first 2 weeks of November, and then opening mid-November. But we want to hire, at least with a promise of hiring, by like August, September, so we know who our staff is going to be, and we can start building relationship and getting everybody trained. So I think that's it. Does anybody have questions on anything? Yes. No, I did not talk about that, so you didn't miss it. So she asked how people are rescued out of trafficking. That doesn't really happen in Delaware, right? Because so I anticipate, like in the last year, I've had probably half a dozen parents who have been to my presentations call me and say, my kid's being groomed. Or my kid has been groomed and is now going to New York City and there's nothing I can do about it. Please help me. Or my kid's been gone for 6 months and just came back and DFS won't help me and I don't know what to do. And we had another case where DFS said, well, if you want our help, you're going to have to sign your child over to us and give us custody. And he was desperate. He didn't know what else to do. And so he did. And we're not open yet, so they put the kid in foster care. Train wreck. Train wreck. And that's usually what does happen because we don't have an answer. So previous to my coming on board and talking to DFS and telling them I wanted to open this, and they were not fans. They have not been supportive. They think foster care is a good enough answer. But yes, exactly right. Yep, age out. So I did have them convinced at least to send them out of state, and we contracted for about 1.5 years with a facility that was out of state that was not a trafficking facility, but it was like a youth ranch for troubled kids, which was better than what we had, but it wasn't a good fit necessarily for all the kids because they ended up running, and it was co-ed, and it was $500 a day. And because that's what it takes to have nurses and have therapists and have residential staff 24/7, it's very, very expensive. That's another reason why nobody wants to do kids, because it's really expensive. And licensing says you have to have all these people. And so after about 1.5 years, DFS said, we are not spending that kind of money anymore. Like, this is too expensive, and we're going to just put the kids back in foster care. And the issue with that, besides the fact that there's some pretty rotten foster care system issues, there are some great foster parents out there. I know some fantastic ones. But even those that are fantastic are not trained to trauma. And they don't understand all these dynamics. They don't understand the triggers. They don't understand the corpus callosum and needing to wait. They don't understand that the only way that these girls have ever associated with adult men, with a dad in the home, is sexually. So then she tries to relate to him that way. And it's a train wreck. Or they also don't understand that when the trafficker says, if you leave and you come back to me and bring me another kid, I'll give you $1,000 and a brand new cell phone. So then there's recruitment issues inside the house with the kids that are biological of those parents. And that's what the system and well-intended foster parents do not understand, and they're not trained, they're not equipped. We don't have a system in place to be able to handle this, which is why Zoe's building one. That's what God told us to do. And so we just keep plugging along, and we keep doing it, and he's going to bring it. Literally, it is God. It literally is God. We have not taken any federal grants. Haven't taken any state money. But as we have needed it, God waits to the very last minute, and then he provides it. So the example he's talking about that I shared was back in 2012 when I started. There was no state legislation even against this. So in 2014, we finally got state legislation passed. 2016, we had our first prosecution, only prosecution. And I decided, okay, I am sitting on the Human Trafficking Coordinating Council. I'm going to recommend that we do a professional training conference for law enforcement, medical, DFS, and adult behavioral health. Now, for the 3 or 4 years before that, I had been all over the state doing these presentations for all those people for free, just to get people to listen. So the Human Trafficking Council laughed at me and said, we don't need training. We don't have this issue here. And so they shut me down, and I heard God say, Zoe's going to hold that. So I said, Zoe's going to hold that. And I got laughed out of the room. And I thought, all right, God, I'm stepping out on faith, and I'm going to hold a conference. So on my way home, that was in Wilmington, I stop in Dover. I go to Dover Downs. I write a $5,000 check out of my own money, and I say I want a conference on this day for 50 people. And I had no idea if anybody was going to show up. And so I called everybody, emailed people that I had done my training for previously, and I said, I'm going to hold a professional conference. You saw the 101, but now we're going to do a deeper dive. Now, I had been traveling through all the other states to see what they're doing, and I built a relationship with them. So I asked those people from other states who've been doing trafficking work to come to Dover Downs on this state and do our training. So I had this whole committee. And so I said, all right, I'm going to open up on, I don't know, October 10th or something. Conference was in November for registration. So I opened it up, and within an hour, all the seats were filled. And I had people calling me saying, Yolanda, you said this was going to be open. Like, it's closed. I said, well, the seats are already filled. And they were like, well, you need to open up some more because we want to come. So I was like, okay. So I opened up some more, and I was using up my $5,000 like really quick. And I got up to like 200, 250 people. And the next day I opened it up again to 300, and it was filled. And I was like, I'm out of money. Like, I don't know what else to do. So I started praying, and I'm driving in my car, and the phone rings, and it's a guy by the name of Steve Himmelfarb from the Matt Haley Trust. And he says, Yolanda, you don't know me. My name's Steve. My best friend Matt was just killed a few months ago in Africa on a motorcycle trip, serving trafficking victims, doing missions. And I want to honor him. And you're the only one doing anything in the state with trafficking. What do you need? I said, well, as a matter of fact, we've got this conference. And so he said, well, what do you need? And I said, I can max this out at 300 more people. He's like, well, how much more do you need? And I said, 10 grand. And he said, you'll have a check tomorrow. So I got my check. We opened it up, 650 people. I had 150 people on a waiting list and about 75 people that showed up that day hoping to get in that somebody else didn't come yet, that I had to send away. So that's one example. We have, like, our plan is God. That's our plan. So as I share this story, and I'm out talking about what God is doing, and people cannot deny that that is what has happened. It inspires their faith. It's me speaking truth, staying on the path, and him stirring in the periphery and bringing people along, just like he said he was going to do. And that led to bigger and bigger grants and funders. So I would go talk to them and just build a relationship with them and tell them what we've done, what the history has been, what's happened, where we're going, and invite them to be a part of it. And at that point, the struggle is then between them and the Holy Spirit. I've done my part. I just let him do his, and then let him write checks. So we've had the Welfare Foundation, who they're in Wilmington, and our first grant we wrote was for a $25,000 grant. And I said, I know that on paper it doesn't look like we need a trafficking facility because there are no arrests and nobody's identified any victims. But that doesn't mean we don't have a problem, so I need to come talk to you and show you. Because they just want stats on paper. They want you to show them, prove to them that there's a need. Well, you can't on paper. And so you have to go talk to them, right? So you can feel the Holy Spirit go, whoom. And he's just in my mouth, and I'm just speaking. And he said, Yolanda, you need to scratch the 25 grand and write it for 50. I said, okay. So I wrote it for 50. He called me back a month later, and he said, we denied your 50. We're giving you 100 instead. That's how we get our funding. It's speaking truth and God stirring and bringing the people. So, and then there's so many stories. So God has just been busy, yes. Okay, so we found this beautiful property that we wanted about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I had walked different properties, and I walked on this property. It was a horse farm. And I knew that was the place. I knew that that's where we were supposed to be. And so we prayed over it. We started claiming it. I talked to the owner, told her what we wanted to do. She was very excited about it. And this was right at the beginning of real estate getting really hot and everything just selling really quick. And so told her what we wanted to do, and she said, well, how much do you have down? And I said, about $5. That's what we got to put down. And she said, I'll take your $5, and I'm going to hold it because I believe this is where you're supposed to be. Over the period of the next few weeks and months, she had cash offers, multiple full-price cash offers that she denied. And she gave us 6 months to raise the money. So by the end of month 3, we had $5,000. We had 3 months to raise $622,000 more dollars. I'm like, if this is where God wants us, he's going to have to bring it. I'm responsible to, not responsible for, right? So time ticks and ticks, and we're getting $100 here and $100 there. Like, and I had been on social media saying, this is where God wants us. I know this is where we're supposed to be, boldly speaking it and putting it out there, and it's just trickling in. I'm like, oh. And so 5.5 months later, 6,000, 7,000. All right. So we just kept praying and kept believing. And it was the very last day. And I went to the owner and I said, can I please spend the night here? I need to be here and I need to pray. And at that point, I was feeling sad because I thought I missed God somehow. And publicly screw up. And I was like, if this is, I pray that God would keep me humble, and if this is what it takes, then have your way. Like, show me. And so I spent the night, and I left her that morning, and I said, Pam, it is not looking good, but we have till 8, you gave us till 8 o'clock tonight, and so I will call you at 8 o'clock tonight. And we were both crying, and I left. All day goes by, nothing. And at 5 o'clock that night, I had to call our colleagues who are our mentors out in Ohio, Rahab Ministries, who does the same work we do, but they're 20 years ahead of us. And I called their leadership team. I said, I need to Zoom with you. Now, in the process of the 6 months, COVID hit. That was month number 3. So there was nothing. There was no money. Like the money that we had been promised, down the toilet. Nobody was given money for anything. And so I said, guys, this is looking like it's not going to happen. And I need you to pray with me because I am pretty distraught. Like if I thought I heard God that clearly and I missed him this bad, like who am I to even lead a ministry? Like Satan was starting to get in my head. And so I said, I need you to pray over me. And so we were praying and crying, and my phone rang in the middle of my prayer, which was really annoying to me. But I turned it off real quick, and we finished praying, and I'm crying, sobbing, and so I checked my phone, and I have a voicemail saying, check your email. So I go check my email. This is now 7:30 at night. An anonymous donor with $622,000. That's our funding source. We have no plan but him. He's it. And I refuse to take money from a government that tells me to do things counter to what God's word tells me to do. And he's going to honor that. So when people like funders will ask me that all the time, and I have to say, we are miraculously provided for by God. And when I tell them stories, and all the funders in Delaware, because we're so small, that's one of the advantages. One of the advantages of being small, they all talk to each other. So then they're like, oh, you gave to Zoe Ministries? Oh, well, what are they doing? Well, how much did you give and what did you give for? And so then they start talking to each other. And we just keep being Jesus. And when they deny us, we just keep being Jesus. And we just keep building a relationship. So that's a really long answer to say we have no plan. So I don't want to keep you, but I mean, I could talk about this all night. So I know you all are getting tired and ready to go, but are there any other questions that you want me to address before we close out? Okay. You know what's really incredible about that is that even though you didn't know, she felt safe here. And so this is like a natural fit, because it's one thing if you know and you've been trained and you're trauma informed and you kind of know, but when you know nothing and she feels safe here to be in this space continually, that's pretty amazing. There's an anointing on this group here for sure. That's crazy incredible. I didn't know that. Look at God. That's awesome. I love it. That's awesome. It's just all kinds of confirmation. Sir. Transportation. So if there are kids in the mentorship program, like we have kids who are 14, 15, 16 years old whose parents really couldn't care less about taking them, and they need a ride to a mentorship session. It has to be same gender and 2 people. It can't be an adult can't be one-on-one. So there would have to be 2 people to transport if it's needed. It's not always needed, but in the mentorship program it may be needed. But we also may need it when we open the house. If we want to do an outing and we have workers and girls and we can't all fit in one vehicle, we may need to carpool. Like those. So I can't say right now where the house is unless people sign disclosures and you're going to come volunteer. But I can tell you it's in Sussex. I can tell you it's between Allendale and Lincoln area. The work that needs to be done is at the house. It is at our property. And yes, that phone number will go to my admin. So if you ever suspect trafficking, need help, have questions about the volunteer stuff, go to our website first, because there's a lot of information there on our website, and check out our Facebook page. We're doing a lot of shifting right now in our staffing, so we have a new social media person, so we're kind of in transition right now. Our clinical counselor is moving on Tuesday to Atlanta. God is moving her back to Atlanta, and so we are looking for a new clinical director. So there's a lot of just changes right now, so just be patient with us as we're trying to navigate all this. Yes, that's the number to call if you want to be part of the workday, and just say that you heard me present tonight. You have not gone through the volunteer orientation, but that you would like to work on Saturday. It's from 8 to 12. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Okay. Yep, I sure will. That'd be great. Any other questions? Well, why don't you all organize it through Pastor, and then if you want to call Lauren as the admin, so you can tell her, like, this is how many people we have coming, this is what kind of equipment we have coming. Like, she can let you know kind of the stuff because we need painting, we need staining, we need bushes pulled out, we need dirt smoothed over, we need barns cleaned out, we do not. So there is a tractor on site that the former owner let us use, and it's there. So we have a tractor there, but we'll have everything that people would need for painting and staining. But as far as like shovels and pulling out landscaping and all that, there's none of that there. People have to bring that with them. 8 to 12 on this Saturday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and normally I do not oversee that stuff, but I will be there because we don't have a volunteer coordinator to oversee that. So I will be there to oversee and let people know what needs to happen. So, any other questions? I've gone way over my time.
Right on time. Sure. If you are wanting to be a part of the workday, then I will be calling the number here. You can contact us here at the church at 856-2252 or even my cell phone, 448-1981. Is that what you needed? Okay. 1981, 448-1981. And if you're thinking you might want to participate in that, let me know before you leave, and then I'll know who I'm thinking about. Well, are you glad you came? Yeah, imagine what God can do with a small place. Yeah, even a small state. There have been prophetic things, Yolanda, about that Delaware was going to have some things that would start here and touch the nation. And usually you think, okay, it's going to be this move of God. It's going to be wonderful, but what's he going to do? Tear down principalities and powers, set people free. That's good stuff. Okay, well, Father, I thank you that you are at work even when we don't know what's going on. And you can provide even when we don't know where it's coming from. And we want to see your kingdom advance and set people free. That's why you came. So, Lord, just give us guidance as how we partner with Zoe Ministry in the days ahead. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Yolanda.